Welcome to Maxed Out Man, helping you become the man you were made to be.
Hey guys, welcome to Maxed Out Man Podcast. This is episode 7. Today I'm talking to a really good friend of mine, Mike Pisciotta. Mike is an author, a business person, serial entrepreneur, one of the coolest guys I know. So this will be a fun discussion. His personal journey has been really cool. His business journey is even cooler. He continues to inspire me and to push me and to yell at me. Mike's been a mentor of mine, business wise, real estate wise, all sorts of things. So we're good friends. So this will be a fun time. So, hey, Mike, thanks, man. Thanks for coming on and welcome.
What's up, man? Thanks for having me, man. Good intro. I appreciate that.
So why don't you just, you've got a very interesting story that I think obviously you've written a book about. You've done, you do all sorts of podcasting and YouTubing and Facebooking about it. So why don't you kind of give us the whole point of this project is just to inspire men to kind of strive to be more than they are right now, and no matter where you're at, you can always strive to be more. And I think your story is especially inspirational for men.
I'll start there because you just said, no matter where you're at, right? So we'll start there because I started my journey in growth and self-development and really learning how to be a man from a prison cell and staring down the barrel of, initially it was a 30-year sentence that they were trying to throw at me as an 18-year-old kid with no direction, and ultimately turned into 10 years that I did do, all 10 years, 3,650 days in a Florida prison. And inside of that prison is where I learned, how to be a man, how to be a husband, how to be a dad, how to be a productive member of society, and, use that time to develop skills, to meet God, to look in the mirror, right? And face myself, face the young man that had put me in that situation. And, for the first time in my life at 18 years old, I learned what personal responsibility was, something that I had never had to do ever up till 18.
And then it hit you pretty hard at that point, right?
Yeah, that's I tell my son that now, he's a boy. And, I share with him, you don't want to learn the personal responsibility lesson the way that I did, and the first 18 years of my life, there was no personal responsibility. It was always somebody else's fault. It was either the neighborhood, the kids, the cops, the judge, the principal, the teacher. It was always somebody other than me, at least in the way that it was presented to me, right? There was always an excuse made for my behaviors, my choices. And looking back, it was me. It was always me. I was always the problem, the trouble, the reason, right? I was always the common factor. And staring down, an affidavit with multiple armed robberies and crimes that in the moment I didn't remember. And even now, I don't really remember a lot about the evening. I had blacked out on Xanax and alcohol and woke up in a jail cell. And, there was a piece of paper in there that was, listing off, all these different charges of things that I just didn't remember them, man. And, me and God had an interesting conversation at that time. And, I looked in the mirror and I said, I don't know where this journey is going to take me. At that point, I didn't know what type of sentence. I didn't know, was I going to get out soon? Was it going to be a long time? My gut said it was going to be years. And I just said, wherever it goes from here, I'm just going to take it one day at a time. And I'm going to use every day to distance myself from the person that put me here. And I did that. And, thankfully, 10 years was enough distance because when I got out, and the rubber met the road, man, and reality was there, and I was no longer an inmate, and I was no longer, being taken care of by the state of Florida. And, I had to step up and be a man and not go back to the streets. Those skills and those 10 years started to come into play, man. And I started doing stuff and, building business. And at that time, it's interesting when I shared this portion of my story because it's 2023 and being an ex-convict, having gone to prison, having a past, whether it's addictions, whatever, is a little bit different now. Like the way that we are viewed is different now. Like jobs are significantly more open to it. I've over the years, I've gotten to become friends with Dave Dahl, who's the founder of Dave's Killer Bread. And he's an advocate for ex-convicts. And he had a legislation that he was doing out west in Portland, where he's from, that was called Remove the Box. And basically the legislation was to remove that checkbox on applications and residential applications, job applications that, where you had to disclose, are you a convicted felon? And, 2009, when I'd come home, it wasn't cool like it is now, right? Like social media, you didn't see people's stories as regularly. It wasn't humanized, if you will. Like I was very much looked at as very standoffish. People, when they would meet me and they would talk to me and they would see, that I was educated, I could carry myself pretty well. I spoke multiple languages even at the time. But it still ultimately came down to, but you're a convicted felon. Yeah. And you have violent felonies. And the doors would shut, man. And, at that time in my life, I was married. And, I knew that I had a choice, man. I had a choice to, was it going to get me bitter? Was it going to make me angry? Was it going to push me into the other side of life? Or was I going to allow those things to become a fuel to push me into, new areas? And looking back, I'm thankful that I didn't get jobs. I'm thankful that all of those doors shut, because who knows what comfort may have done to me, right? Who knows what, getting a decent job, making good pay, would that have, created a level of comfort where I maybe didn't go entrepreneurial? I tend to think not, just because of my own character, and you know me well enough, Kevin, to know that there's no way I would have thrived in a corporate or job environment. But it's a different world now. And, I'm thankful for it, as I have friends that come home and, are leaving that world behind, and they get to come out to a place and a society that's a little bit more accepting of them than the one that I faced was. And, they come out to me, right? Like I'm here, they can see, well, Mike did it, I can do it. There was no Mike when I came home. There was no guy like me that created success and, built businesses and real estate and such where I could be like, hey, that guy did it, I can do it. And that's awesome that you have the opportunity to become that guy, right? That guy didn't exist for you. And I know that you work really hard and have a passion for that, because even though it's a better environment, it's still, it's still hard to get accepted with that kind of stuff on your record, which may be why so many people that have been in that situation end up kind of the revolving door. Going back. Yeah. And even friends that I've had that have come home, like I've had friends that I had done time with that had come home shortly after I did get out here, and for some reason or another, see the things that I've created, and they made excuses. Oh, it was easier for you. You were this, you that, which is, it literally blows my mind that someone could look at me and say, oh, it was easier for you. I literally had probably one of the hardest paths that most people could ever have had to travel. And, they, for whatever reason or not, they make excuses, and then they wind up, back. And I've had friends go back to prison, and of course I write them, I reach out, I go visit, and, I try to be there for them, even if they stumble. And thankfully one of them is out now, and he's doing well. He seems to have gotten his life together and is thriving and stuff, man. But yeah, I think that was one of the things that drove me, what you had said. And that is that because there wasn't a me, and I also had guys that I had left behind in prison, I knew that I wanted to be that guy. And I'll share a little story. About 3-4 days before I had walked out of prison, it was in September of 2009. I maybe 3-4 days before the state was going to release me. I sat down, and I really felt that God was impressing me to do this activity. And it was to write myself a letter. And I knew at the time that this letter was going to be read by the free version of myself. And so here I am, I'm in prison, and I'm writing a letter to the Mike that would read it in 3 or 4 days from now that would be free. And one of the things that was very strongly pressed on me to write to myself was this story that Jesus shared about 10 lepers, right? He heals 10 of them. All 10 of them get healed, and only one of them comes back to say thank you. And I felt a very, very strong pressing to be the one, to not be like the other 9 guys, because while I was in prison, God really blessed me. I met my wife when I was in prison. I had that support, and I had things around me to help me. I was exposed to the Bible. God shifted my mindset. So I had those things. And I knew to get out and to create success that I couldn't just squander that, right? Like I had to use that success to give back. And I felt like that was my way of saying thanks for taking care of me for 10 years, and my way of saying thanks for putting a good woman in my life, and, giving me the right mindset to get out of prison and create success and not go back. And so I wrote that to myself. And when I got out, the letter came, and I almost forgot about it, man. I had gotten out here, and, life just happens, man. Especially, you're in prison for 10 years, and then you get out here, and cell phones and Google and Facebook and DVRs and HDMI and all of these things that I'd never seen before.
Yeah, because you would have gone in right as the internet was kind of just getting going. That was right before .com boom and all that kind of stuff, early 99,
Correct.
Right? So
yeah, we, as an 18-year-old criminal, we had cell phones, but you could just make a phone call. They didn't even have text message. We had those Ericssons and Nokias and pagers were still kind of a regular thing. Most of us had pagers. The one guy that was doing all right might have a cell phone, but the internet it wasn't what it was. Google didn't exist, Facebook didn't exist, iPods didn't exist. And then I come home, and it just seems like things are moving so fast, and you realize that life didn't wait. Like the world didn't stop, even though it felt like it did. Like my world stopped. For 10 years. I went in, and then I aged, but I came home with the same skill set, mindset, if you will, understanding of life that I went in with. If, I had never experienced what the free people were, what was a part of their normal days. Even debit cards wasn't a normal thing in 1999 for me. Like it wasn't something that everybody had. We still wrote checks. Imagine that, so I just had to get used to all this stuff, man. So the letter comes in the mail, and I'm like, oh man, wow. I wrote this. And, and I read it, man, and I still have the letter now, and, I read it, regularly. I use it to remind myself. And I think it's one of those things that did drive me, right? Like and I think it was something that became fuel when doors shut in my face, when people, wouldn't hire me, and they'd say, we're sorry, but, your felonies are, they're too much. We're not going to be able to, give you an opportunity. It was the thing that kept me going in the right direction, because I knew that there was a team of guys behind me that were looking at me, that were still inside of prison. Because I told them, man, I'm going to become a millionaire, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to travel the world, and I'm going to live life on my own terms, and I'm going to create freedom. And, and everyone said, yeah, right, sure. You'll be out there smoking crack and selling dope and this, that, and the other, and you'll be back. And I said, I'm not going to be that guy, man. I'm not coming back. And so I kind of had that almost monkey on my back, right? Like I have to be successful, because there's a whole slew of guys behind me that are looking at me to do it, right? Like I was almost like the great white hope, if you will. Like I was like the guy that everybody was like, you know what? Like, because when I was inside, I had such a regimen of how I did my time. Like I was very, very success minded. I broke my day up into, I started my day with Bible study, then it was languages, then business, then real estate, then the stock market. And then I did it the afternoon. I recycled that again. And, between, exercising and whatnot. So my day in prison was very methodical with utilizing every minute I had. And the other guys around me saw that, and they were like, man, listen, if he can't be successful, we don't have any hope, man, because these guys are still gambling and wanting to, be involved in the wrong things still inside of prison. And, here I am just devoted, to improvement. And so I knew that when I had come home, man, I have to do this, man. Like these guys are looking at me to do it. And if they see that I can do it, and they saw that it worked, like, wow, all these years, this dude was telling us that he was going to do this, and he was reading books, and we made fun of him for just reading and studying and involving himself in things that we aren't involved in. If he could do it, then yeah, man, like it could be done, and this can work. And so I knew that, and it drove me. And
did you feel like that you probably had two types of people that wanted you to succeed and people that definitely didn't want you to succeed, right? Like, I don't know in that environment how many supporters you had. But it sounds like from not many. I would suspect it's that crab in a bucket mentality, right? Like it's an interesting 100%. Thing that people do. it seems like in certain situations, demographics, whatever you want to call it, that is a more prominent behavior than in others. Right. So if you surround yourself with those kind of people that are always trying to pull you down, then man, you gotta find a new group, find a new bucket. Right.
And I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because as an inmate, that was probably one of the most challenging elements. Is here I am trying to do the right thing, trying to grow, study, read, improve myself. And there was no support. Like it wasn't just every once in a while I'd get a good friend, and their mentality was similar, but it was 98% trying to drag me down. Officers, inmates, just constantly all around, man. And it's an interesting point, because what drove me through that was the realization that if I can develop the skills here, I can certainly deploy them outside of the street. Because when I go back into prisons, because I do go back in and I speak and I get to share with those guys. And a lot of those guys are used to like the ministry type speakers, like the people that go in and talk to them about the Bible, which is awesome. Like those guys need that, right? But most of those folks kind of just pat those guys in the butt, give them a cookie, and tell them Jesus loves them, right?
Right.
Like they're just not sharing the reality, right? Because they have never been to prison, right? They're not telling these guys, listen, bro, when you get out, it is hard. It is not easy to go from being in prison, especially for a length of time, to just come out of here and then just be handed responsibility. It's not easy at all.
Yeah. Yeah, knowing Jesus doesn't solve all those problems for you when you come out. I mean, it helps, but it doesn't solve it.
Correct, right? Like it doesn't pay bills. It doesn't deal with, like, I've had a friend that came home he left when his daughter was 2, came home, she was 16. And if you have a teenage daughter, you understand what a teenage daughter's like.
Oh,
especially
my Lord.
For a guy.
Yeah. Send me back to prison instead of giving me a 14 or 15-year-old.
and a lot of guys are like that. Like a lot of guys, that's their mentality is like, but when I share with the guys, I share with them that this perspective that nobody else is sharing with them. And when they hear it, they're just, you just see the light bulbs go off, and they cling to it because they know that it is truth. And the truth is that, listen, it's not easy, right? When you're in prison, there is this way of thinking, right? Your mind as an inmate tells you that there's no problem that you'll face as a free citizen that's harder than a problem you'll face in prison simply because you're now free. No matter what happens out here, at least you're free. But that's not really the truth of how it feels when you're a free person, right? When you're out here and you've got a baby on the way, a 16-year-old daughter that's cutting her arms, and she's going into a program, you can't pay your bills, nobody will hire you, you just got a blowout, you got pulled over, the guy down the street's trying to get you to sell dope, all of these things are hitting you at one time. That is very, very hard, and it's very, very challenging. And if you don't develop the skills and the perspective to recognize that these are the things that are going to get thrown at you, you will fail, period. And I tell these guys that.
So it's setting the right expectation for these guys when they get out. So what are, like you said, if you don't have the skills, what skills in particular do you kind of try to work on them with? I mean, I know what your skill set is, but you're a little bit like me, where not everybody has the same drive, knowledge, skill set, kind of innate skill set that not everybody has the same one.
So when I speak to the guys in prison, one of the things that I'll share with them is that, a common thing that we face in prison is, just officers that are just power hungry, right? Like they just abuse their power. They disrespect you. They try you. They do all of these different things, and they create situations that are challenging for you. And most of the guys get really angry. They get bothered. They let it just push them into bad places. They get themselves in trouble. They go to confinement. Sometimes they'll assault officers. And I share with them that, these are opportunities, because when those things happen to me, like one of the things that happened to me regularly was I used to get books sent in all the time, whether they were language books, business books, real estate books. My wife, Robin, would send books into me, and I would have officers that would search my property and take those books away just to bother me for no reason other than just to harass me. I would get them back, but it would take a week or two. I'd have to go through the process. I'd have to go to the property room, prove they were mine. It was a whole thing. And the officers knew that, right? And the first time it happened, it really discouraged me. It really got me upset. It really, why would they do, why would these officers want to make it harder for me to improve? Don't they want me to get out there and excel, right? Isn't it more advantageous for society for me to be productive? But again, you're dealing with juvenile minded people. They're not mature themselves. They
Right.
haven't, developed life skills. And the second time it happened, I recognized that this is a chance to develop character. This is a chance for me to use a situation that is really, really hard, a situation that is pushing the limits of my patience, that is really putting me in a spot where the natural response is bitterness, anger, and violence. Like that's what rose up in me. And I saw, if I can develop the ability to not just suppress this, but to see this as something that I could use to fuel me forward into better things and start developing it now. When I get out of prison and I'm faced with hardship, challenges, people shut the door to my face, calling me an ex-convict, saying I'm a felon and I'll always be a felon, whatever it is, that I will have already exercised those muscles, right? And I think this is an area, and I share this with these guys, is that if the first time you face challenges and you have to deal with anger, frustration, the feelings of wanting to be violent, rage even, if the first time you feel that as an inmate, an ex-convict, if you will, is when you get out and feel with it and properly deal with it, not just feel it, because you feel it all the time in prison. Most of those guys just don't deal with it properly.
They've been practicing the other kind of behavior, right? Like they've been leaning into the behaviors, that carnal behavior versus the intellectual one, right?
Correct. And versus, having emotional intelligence and recognizing it. So I share with them to use those situations, right? And when they see it, when I share it with them, and because it's interesting to share this because, prison's a power struggle constantly. Between inmates and officers, freedom and not. And when I begin to share with them and they see, listen, this is the opportunity for you to take back control, because those officers are messing with you because they want control over you. And when you become violent, when you rage, when you sell them out, when you cuss them out, when you do whatever, you're giving them what they want. You're allowing them to win. When you can now begin to use that situation to develop character, you've beat them.
Yeah.
And when the guys see that, it shifts the way they see those situations, and the light bulbs go up, because now it's a frame change, right? Now the frame of these people are controlling me, they're trying to hurt me, they're hating me, why they want to get in my way, to they're giving me an arena to develop skills that are going to ultimately allow me to show them that I can be successful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Completely shifts the frame. And I share that with the guys, that when I do it, and when I share it that way, it blows their mind, because they understand it, and they can only hear it from somebody like me, because only somebody like me understands what it feels like to be an inmate, what it feels like to have an officer come and take the stuff out of your locker, and
if I go in there and they're not going to listen to a guy like me, right? Like I've never been to prison of all that stuff, so.
It's a different thing, man. And those skills, I mean, they helped me when I got out here, man. They helped me when I face challenges, and even now, I would say I'm removed from a lot of those beginning challenges, because it's been almost 14 years and I've built a good track record of success for myself. So now the story is much different when it's shared, but those first 2, 3, 4 years, it was very much a needing those skills, man, to rely on when people shut the door in my face, and when people got upset with me. When they
you're in a different you're in a different community now too, right? Like the people that you surround yourself with and all that is different. I talk about I always talk about when I'm not a haters kind of guy. Like people talk about haters and all, and I don't really care if people don't like me. That doesn't really, that's their problem. But I always talk about, if you only have a finite amount of energy, right? Emotional energy, especially. And if you continue to give that away towards people trying to steal it from you, there's only so much. Like that energy now can't go to building yourself and embedding yourself and to your family and kids and, all of your health, everything. So you have to, what you're kind of describing is that concept where it's like, if I give into this anger and rage and all of that, I've now given that opportunity away to continue to grow.
Correct. And that's what the officers want. Like they want that. They wanted me to snap. They wanted me to get upset and get mad, where I would lose my visitations or my phone privileges, and they wanted to create that downward spiral. Why? It's just, in the moment, I couldn't answer why, but you
Is
know,
that a
bravest people.
systemic problem? Is that something, they talk about the
Yeah,
prison industrial complex and all that kind of stuff. I don't know whether,
yeah.
I'm curious, are the individual officers part of that complex to where that's a systemic, this is how you're supposed to treat them, or is that just part of the culture?
I think so. It's interesting because I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I've never been to officers training as far as if they train them that way. I have talked to new officers, and most officers don't start that way. I think they don't guard their own hearts,
Mm-hmm.
and they allow what the other officers are doing and the perspective on inmates to begin to shape them. They may start the job off as humans and looking at us as humans, and then that changes along the way somewhere. I don't always know where or why, but it is systemic in the fact that it doesn't matter what institution you go to, what state you go to. I've talked to guys. I have friends that have done time in Portland, Georgia, Missouri, New York, Tennessee. It's all the same thing. The same idea is there. And it's interesting because there's this thing called the Stanford experiment. And I don't know the exact details or the time frame. I want to say it was in the late 70s, maybe early 80s. And it was at the university, and they took the class, and they wanted to study basically the concept of absolute power.
Mm-hmm.
And so they created a prison environment, right? And they took half the students, and half of the students were the inmates, and half were the guards. Now, these were people that knew each other. Like, these were friends before this experiment started. And a couple of months into the experiment, I believe, and again, some of the details, I'm paraphrasing and, maybe dramatizing it a little bit more. But basically what happened is the students that were the guards began abusing the inmates, even though they were like, you knew these people. And it just demonstrated that when you hand a human being ultimate authority and power over another human being, if that's not guarded and checked, and you don't have a person with a proper heart perspective, that is going to result in abuse at some point. And that's the prison environment, man. And that's and I hate to see it. I hate to see that it is what it is. I don't know if me as an individual can change that system. What I feel like I can change is how the guys in the system view it. And because everything's a tool, right? Like, no matter where we go, you're gonna have challenges in prison. You're gonna have challenges outside of prison. You're gonna have people that you don't like, that wish you well and wish you ill inside of the gates and outside of those gates, right? If you can develop the skills to deal with that and find the place within you where those things become something that drives you to better, you are winning the game. And that's what I teach those guys. And that's what I share with my friends that are out here. That is how you win the game, right? Like, we think about muscle growth. You're an avid exerciser. I'm a guy, I train jiu-jitsu, and I'm constantly getting my butt handed to me on the mats. And I eagerly go back. My wife doesn't understand. I come home, I got black and blues on my face. My neck is sore. My elbows are sore. And she's like, you, it's probably one of the things I've seen you the most eager to return to. well, why? Because I see the journey in it, right? I see that it's in getting beat up. It's in getting my butt handed to me. It's in getting choked and tapped and strangled and smothered that I am getting better. And prison life, I think, no matter where you are, like, when you see the things that are meant to smother you and choke you as really the things that can make you better, nothing can beat you. Like, you cannot be defeated.
Yeah, because every challenge that hits you, you can use that as a tool to better that whole iron sharpens iron and all of that concept. Now, is that something that you set out to do from day one, or is that something you had to develop over time?
Day one from prison, or
day one that you went in? Like, did you go to it, with that, or did you develop it over time?
It actually happened pretty quickly. So waking up in a jail cell, I was actually still a little high from the Xanax and the drugs and hungover and all of that. And when the realization of the situation I'd put myself in hit me, I started taking just personal responsibility and recognizing that I put myself there. And I started saying, I have to change. Right? Yeah. Like, nothing's going to change if I don't change it. And at that time, I didn't know, like I shared earlier, I didn't know how much time I was going to wind up doing. I think in the beginning, I definitely, my pursuit of God and biblical stuff was very self-serving, right? Like, I wanted, like, listen, if I read the Bible and I start going to services, I need you to look out and pull some strings with the judge to get me less time. That was my motivation, dude, God knows that.
Yeah,
right? Like he knows our motivations, and I think sometimes he will use things like that to get us to the places that we need to be. Right, like those situations. Had those situations not happened to me, maybe I wouldn't have pursued it at the same level that I did in the desperation of where I was at. Right, in the desperation of them wanting to give me 30 years. And feeling all of that, and feeling where I was stuck between a rock and a hard place, and
because if you've been at 3 to 5, if you've been in for 3 to 5, you wouldn't have the really, and then you probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to get to where you needed to be by the 10.
And I agree, and there's no way to know that. I think God knows that. I think He's the only one, and when I get there, He may show me that, like, hey, if you would have done 3, here's what might have happened.
Yeah,
I think if I would have done less time, I still think that I may have been changed myself, but I think the lessons that 10 years taught me, and the people that I met, and the relationships that I developed over that time, and becoming a dad and a man and a husband, and recognizing that over that 10 years, I don't think 3 years would have done it. I think getting out at, I would have been 21, 22. I think I would have been a different 22-year-old had I never gone to prison. But to say that it would have led me to where I am now, I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't think
it's hard to predict, right?
We never know that. And but yeah, to answer your original question, it did start pretty quickly. I think the personal development and the desire to change did, and it came out of fear. It came out of a desperation, almost like a bargain, right? All right, God, I'm gonna go to every Bible study. I'm gonna read the scriptures daily, and I'm gonna talk to people, and when it's court time, I need you to show up for me.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of what put my character, my heart, my mindset into a moldable position for change to start happening. And then I spent 16 months in the county jail, and then they ultimately sentenced me to 10 years, and they gave me a 10-year mandatory sentence, which in the state of Florida means no good time.
Right.
So when I got to prison, I didn't have motivation any longer. So this is where it's interesting, because a lot of folks say that, especially, from a Christian biblical perspective, when guys get to, the jailhouse religion, we've all heard of it.
Yeah.
I had no motivations, because no matter what I did, I was going to do 10 years, 3,650 days. There was no chance to get any time off my sentence. There was no chance to get out earlier. There was no benefit at all. But at that time, I was changed. Like, I was different. The hook was in me, right? It's been 16 months. It was in me. And, I used the rest of my time, to continue growing, even though it was no longer motivated by fear, and it was no longer motivated out of a desperation. I knew 10 years was what I was going to do, and that wasn't going to change. There was no, my sentence wasn't going to be commuted. There was no evidence. Like, they had me on video. There was no disputing my charges or anything along those lines. I was dead to rights. They literally had me on multiple videos.
You were done, right? Yeah.
I was done. So any motivation and any, improvement at that point was, came from the desire to, not just the fear and whatnot. And I'm thankful. People ask me now, would you change that? Would you change the 10 years? No, I would not. I would change, obviously, the crimes that were committed, because people were injured and hurt, and, that side of things. But the time, the sentence, I wouldn't change it, because I know that I needed that. And I know that it shaped, I wouldn't be where I am now. How can I be happy, thankful for where I am now in life, and not be thankful for the challenges, the setbacks, the struggles that got me here?
Yeah.
I think that's an important lesson, for everybody, no matter where you are.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and not that everybody would follow it, but it is unfortunate that we don't have programs, and real systemic things that we can do to help those that would take advantage of it, find that motivation and have the resources and all that to better themselves. And, it's a little cyclical, I think, because there's definitely bad guys in prison and good guys in prison, and, the good guys that did bad things and bad guys that did bad things. So whether they're, I'm interested, one of the things I appreciate you sharing all that. I love that story. And I'd be interested if you want to share kind of where you are now with your entrepreneurial journey and kind of walk us through some of that stuff from, digging stuff out of, the free pile, the trash, the free pile, and selling it on eBay and that sort of thing. And some of your real estate stuff that you do, just as kind of like a framework for what people can achieve.
So, my first, as I shared earlier, coming out of prison in 2009, I was gung ho thinking that, I would get a job and, success would kind of come. And I started putting applications and those doors shut pretty quickly. And, we live in an area in Florida that was deeply impacted by the recession of 8 and 9 and 10. And we're very investor friendly area. So when the real estate market crashed in 08 and 09, this area was hit very hard. And I'm also where the Space Center is. So at the same time, they had announced the closing of the Space Shuttle project back, NASA was going to be, there was no more government funding happening then, which was what was the major driver of jobs in this area. So it was just a very rough time economically where we were. So I was competing with, the average Joe who had 0 felons versus me who had my entire arm, list of felonies and charges dating back to when I was 12 years old. Nobody would hire me ever. I've never gotten a job other than for myself from the day I walked out of prison. The last time I was employed was when I was 18, right before I went to prison. And it's interesting because the job my wife had, she lost because she married me.
Oh, wow.
Which seems interesting. And so, both her and I, we dug deep.
And you were married, you were still incarcerated when you got married. What do they think's going to happen?
Yeah, right.
It's not like you're going to show up at her job one day.
Yeah. We still didn't understand why, but, we were like, whatever, that's fine. And, both her and I used that, to push us into places that, it allowed us to find what we're made of, and, we did, we started, we were young, I was 28 at the time. I think, my wife's about 2 years older than me, so she was just turning 30. And we just started hustling, man. And we would go out on trash night and we would find things like printers and vacuums that people would leave on the side of the road. Craigslist was real popular back then, and we would start selling it on Craigslist. And we used that to get ourselves into internet marketing. I think Craigslist was probably our first dabble into internet marketing. From there, I learned how to, back then businesses would pay you to be able to post ads on Craigslist all over the country, or because the platform only allowed someone to post an ad for once for 30 days, but we could game the system and hide white text in there. We'd use HTML code and make the text look white, so you couldn't really see it, but the system saw it and it looked like it was a different ad. So we'd stuff keywords, and that was my very, very first internet marketing experience. And we did that. We did it for clients. And then I wound up securing a client we used back then. We used to use a website called Elance, which now is kind of morphed to Upwork or something. I think
they turned it into Upwork. Yep.
Yeah. And I got a client in Australia, and I used to manage his CRM and emails. And then I went to college locally, which has done nothing for my business and professional life other than I have a piece of paper, and I became the first person in my family to get a degree, which was kind of an accomplishment for me. Yeah. And that was really what drove me. I just wanted to do it because I could. And in internet marketing, my wife and I really dove in, and I think it tapped into her and I's natural, just core skill sets and what we really enjoyed. We loved the art of marketing and really digging into what makes people click, what makes people buy, what makes people take action. And we dug deep into the psychology of marketing and all of that side of things, direct response. And, we built, a business around doing done for you. We built websites, and after about a year or two, we hated it because it owned us. And we decided to completely ditch the business. We fired all of our clients and shifted directions to kind of a coaching informational side of things, which is where we still are now. We still do that. And it played mainly to, I think, her and I's core, just passionate of who we are. We are teachers at heart. We really like seeing results, seeing light bulbs go off across the spectrum, whether it's me speaking to inmates in a prison, whether it's me teaching students about real estate or Facebook advertising or marketing as a whole. it was the thing that just drove us. And
Mm-hmm.
we built businesses around that. And in about 2015, we decided to extend our skill sets and get involved in e-commerce and start selling physical products. Because up to that point, we had only done like information, books, events.
Mm-hmm.
And we ventured off and we saw success very, very quickly. We built our first Shopify store. I bought it from a guy. It was a pre-built store and he really didn't know what he was doing. And I bought the store from him for like $1,200. And I knew that buying the store would just push me into learning everything about Shopify. And I did, and I dug in, and I found a product SKU that he had in the store, and we blew it up, and we took the store from, I think it was doing about $6,000 or $7,000 a month to $90,000 a month in like 90 days.
Wow.
And we blew that up, and we used that money, and we started separate brands in e-commerce that we've ultimately sold since then. One was in the photography niche, one was in the essential oil niche, and as we were building those brands, we got a deep education on e-commerce. We wound up opening a warehouse locally. I think you actually had been to the warehouse when you've been to Florida before.
Yeah.
Kevin, we started doing an e-commerce like store and a weekend workshop.
Yeah. What year did I do that? Because we did that. Michelle and I did that workshop. What year was that? Been like 16 or 17?
16. I want to say it was 16. Yeah.
Man, that's
probably
almost
7 years ago now.
7 years ago. Wow. That's crazy.
It seems like it was only like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
The time goes by, man. But we loved it, and we still do. We still have products in e-commerce. We just grew so fast, and we were selling on Amazon. We had our own line of the essential oil grew really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing a couple $100,000 a month, and we had our own line of oils. We had our own line of products, shipping. We had a full big warehouse, employees, and
you guys were ahead of the curve a little bit on the drop shipping stuff.
Yeah,
for sure. You guys were ahead of the curve on that, and.
Yeah, like 2014, 15, 16, when we got into it, it was really wild, wild west. Like there wasn't drop shipping courses. There wasn't really a thing. Like it wasn't a common thing. I didn't even really know what it was when I had gotten started. And I didn't know how the process functioned. Nobody really knew a whole lot. There was a very small handful of guys that were doing. They were just crushing it because nobody was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And we rode the wave, and we grew so fast. We had about 150 SKUs. And it just became more than we wanted to manage.
Yeah.
I didn't share this earlier, but one of the things that has always driven my wife and I in everything we've ever done has been the pursuit of freedom. And, my story ties into why freedom is so valuable to me. So we were losing our freedom. That's why we sold, we cashed in the earlier business of doing the done-for-you services way back when, and then moved into the coaching side. And then even with e-commerce, it started out, very leveraged, and then it grew. Managing 100, Kevin, managing 150 SKUs is not fun when you're dealing with suppliers in China and a 40-foot shipping container and customs, and it just got to be way more. And then the content side. So it forced us to have to do things that really weren't what we really loved doing, which was the marketing side. And it started out there. And so we sold both of those brands. And luckily for us, we actually sold them right before COVID. Like, I sold the camera store in 19, and I sold the essential oil store. I think the transaction closed in February of 20. Wow. And then the world shut down in March.
Yeah.
And we weren't done with e-commerce.
Which actually 20 and 21 were a pretty good time to be on the e-commerce side. People staying at home spending quote unquote free money, right? I miss 2020, Mike.
Me too, actually, because we actually launched, we cashed in on that boat.
Yeah.
We launched a product we sold to stores, and then in March of 20, we said, we love e-commerce. We have the skill set. We know what we're doing. Instead of building a whole store that's around all these different SKUs and products and so much to manage, upsells, downsells, products, SKUs, inventory, we decided to do a single product funnel. We wanted to find one viral product that maybe had 2 or 3 products that were accessorized or that were complementary to the product, and just build a really good direct response funnel. And we did. And in 10 months, we sold $1.2 million worth of assault rifle bags.
Yeah, I remember that bag. I like that bag.
Everybody liked that bag, and it was I think it was just, yes, there was some skill and our own, understanding and expertise involved, but I think there was a lot of luck and timing that happened to us also. And we kind of anticipated, we knew the world was shutting down. Guns and ammo were a huge thing. People didn't know what was going to happen with the world in 2020. And you couldn't find ammo. And we saw that. We saw like, man, people are, they're trying to buy guns and ammo and this and that. what if we sold something that was complementary to that?
Yeah, because you can't sell guns and ammo on Facebook. Like that's one of the challenges, right? So you sell something that's adjacent to it.
Yeah. And that was exactly what fueled our decision making, is that we saw that the guns, the ammo, the prepping, the survival niche at the time was just on fire. People were frantic, thinking their freedoms were taken, which they were. Their freedoms were getting taken away. They were being quarantined. And people didn't like it. They wanted to arm themselves. And but we knew we can't sell guns and ammo on Facebook. You can't sell knives, anything. What could we sell, right? That people are wanting, that is complementary to this. And we actually started with a pistol bag, and then we added a rifle bag to it. And it just took off, dude. We sold so many of those, and the margins were incredible. The shipping times were great. And like I said, in 10 months, we did 1.2 million in sales of just that one single product. And, we just morphed, and we've done multiple other, single product funnels. We still have some that run now. The pistol bag even still runs right now on Facebook. We've done some single products in the essential oil niche. We kind of tapped into things that we already knew that we wanted to do, even photography, products that we wanted to offer for the photography side, the essential oil, that we just didn't have the time to do because we were so tied up with inventory and multiple SKUs. And we just stayed focused on just doing one funnel, like one product, really long form, nice page that's just selling one product, good video, and it's just done well. And I think as things shifted, because not only did COVID happen, but as you're familiar, right, with iOS 14, everybody, freaked out.
Kicked us in the nuts hard.
Right. Hard. Everybody. It did it to everybody, man. And, you have to pivot. We had to pivot just like anything in life. And, we responded to it. And I think the single product funnel really played into that. And it worked well. And then, the TikTok happened, and, marketing is just, it's always evolving. Right.
Yeah,
I've always been a person that has always believed that the platforms change, humans don't. Right. Like, 100 years ago, it was the emergence of radio and, newspaper, print ads. But the psychological things that got people to hear a radio ad and then go to Woolworth or Sears or, wherever it was that they went back then, to buy a product. It's the same thing that gets the person to move the mouse over, hit add to cart, and buy my product now. It's the same psychological things. And I think that's why I've seen success in a plethora of different businesses, niches, business types, audiences, because those core things is what we have focused on, right? And I think even now, AI and XR marketing and virtual reality are hot. And I think they're going to be things that are going to fuel the future.
Yeah.
But I think where people are getting messed up is that they're focusing on the tool, the platform, not the psychology and the humanity behind what makes those things successful as platforms.
Yeah. And that's it's understanding human nature, human behavior, and whether or not you're an entrepreneur trying to sell stuff, or if you work a 9 to 5 job.
Correct.
that same understanding of human nature is what can drive your success. One of the things I think you and I both share is an ability to kind of connect with people on different, no matter where they are. So whether it's a convict
Correct.
or a CEO, you've got the guy from, Dave Dole, Droll, right? You got Dole, Dave's Killer Bread, which I love, by the way. But like, it doesn't matter who you're talking to, you have that ability to connect. And I think what a lot of people do is they see entrepreneurs, they see people like us who have had multiple companies, and, I run multiple companies like you, do different projects, is that they think, well, I'm just a welder, or quote unquote, or I'm a mechanic, or I'm a plumber, or, whatever. And they don't see that connection, that really that entrepreneurial spirit is something that can permeate even a guy that goes and collects a paycheck, which, if you're like us, a lot of times those months when you're like, hey, I think I'd like to just have a steady paycheck at some point, that would be, there are definitely months when I wish I had that.
Yeah, like that's the side that people, like entrepreneurialism is so sexy right now. Like, it's because social media is made like that's the ultimate goal, but people don't realize like it's just as challenging. Like at a job, at least you wake up knowing what I'm going to make today or this week. As an entrepreneur, you don't. Like, it's completely on you to go out there and make it happen, man, and hustle and just make it happen, man. And if you don't, then there's nobody, there's no boss to go to at the end of the week and pick up a paycheck, right? Like if that business doesn't profit for the week, you're still going to get a paycheck.
Yeah.
As the entrepreneur, you're not.
Yeah. Hey, I'd like to talk just, and I've kept you for a while, but I want to talk about fatherhood a little bit. And I also am interested in talking about how you and Robin, Michelle and I work together, but she's not as active in the day to day, right? Like working with Robin, I know you guys kind of have a divide and conquer kind of deal. A lot of the guys that might be listening to this they either have a job that they go to and their wife has a different job, but talk about like the relational side of working together to do life, not necessarily just working together to build business and build wealth and money and all that stuff, but just working together to build life. She's a fireball for sure. And
yeah, you could say that again.
I love Robin, but I think a lot of guys get a little lackadaisical about their relationship with their wives. And I think it takes more work than what most guys are willing to put in. So I'm interested in kind of your perspective. You and I have actually never talked about this, so it'll learn an experience for me.
That's a good question. Like that question has come to me in a couple of different formats, and one of them being, how do you guys, work together? Because, most folks, marriage is hard, just like anything in life. Like it's certainly not easy, after year 2 to year 3 to year 4, like once the honeymoon phase ends and, all the, the feelings and stuff, and then there's the day to day and, like the familiarity and stuff begins to set in, like it's definitely work, man. And then when you add the component of working together and being next to one another on a daily basis, and your finances are tied, your business decisions are tied, your sales, marketing, like all of those things, you doing a project, like if she doesn't finish her portion, then I can't do my portion. Mm-hmm. And like those things, the first 2 or 3 years we were at each other. Like it was cats and dogs. As you can imagine, both her and I are very passionate personalities,
yeah.
Right? To say the least. And, but then, we learned to recognize, and I think men, no matter where you are, whether you're a mechanic, a welder, a Fortune 500 CEO, I think it's learning each other's strengths and weaknesses and how to complement that, man, and how to flow inside. Because I think once you find that stride, the Bible says that a twofold cord, how could two walk together unless they agree? And a threefold cord's not easily broken, man. And that's so true of marriage. Like the things that I've accomplished because I'm married and because she's my partner have trumped anything I ever could have done by myself. It's just hands down. And it wouldn't have been had we not found our stride, right? Had we not been able to find, her weaknesses. She's and it's interesting because we complement one another. I'm very just big picture, break stuff, fix it later, just act. And, she's, super analytical. And, an example of that is real estate. I got started buying real estate. 2019 was the year that I said, no matter what, we had money, all of our lifestyle was taken care of. Money was no longer an issue for us. And at that point, I realized that it's not about how much you make, it's how much you keep. And, I wanted legacy for my kids. I wanted to get into, leverage, and, real estate was really always, even from when I was in prison, was always the goal for us. It's always where we ultimately saw us, which for those that are listening, real estate is really probably the main thing that I'm active in right now.
Yeah, we're going to do, I'm hoping Mike and I are going to collaborate on one of the courses for the Maxed Out Man stuff. I want to have him involved and really kind of go through a bunch of that, but keep going.
So when we got started in real estate, it was one of those things where we recognized, she's really analytical. She's going to pay attention to all the details that I will not. Just do it, put in the offer, buy the property. And I kind of approached it that way. It was a new venture. And I just, I'd read books, I'd listened to podcasts, I'd taken courses, and I knew real estate's not going to happen for me unless I just step out and just do it. And I just put an offer, buy a property, and I'm going to make mistakes. And I did. And I wound up buying a crack house, a full-blown crack house, because for two reasons. One, I didn't listen to my wife. Don't tell her that I said that. I hope she doesn't hear this. She told me, make sure you get an inspection. Don't trust a realtor. And I was just moving so fast, and I just wanted to make things happen, man. And I learned a ton, and that's a situation that I don't regret. I'm glad that I did that situation because it taught me things about real estate and transactions and the game that I never could have learned reading a book, listening to somebody talk, or just seeing it. Right? I had to go through it, and I made every mistake that a new investor can make on that deal. I didn't get an inspection. I never saw the property. I listened to the realtor. Oh, it just needs a coat of paint. You can just put a tenant in there. They were literally cooking crack inside the home. And he didn't tell me this. And when we bought the property, we had squatters in there, which, for lack of a better term, we'll call them squatters. They were doing all kinds of felonious activities inside of the building. And it took me 6 months to get them out, and I did. And I wound up selling the building, and I still made $19,000 selling that property 6 months after buying it. I did nothing to it other than just get the crackheads out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a ton, about real estate, and that's gone on. That property has morphed into a multi-million-dollar portfolio, and now I teach real estate and help students get into their first deal and such.
Mike's my real estate mentor, full disclosure. Yeah. And, I don't think that the Spring Lake house in Oklahoma City trumps your crack house, but it'll give it a pretty good run for its money. My first property that I did, had basically every challenge that you could face,
in one deal.
In one deal. Yeah.
You had not just the property, like issues, with different things popping up with the property, but just the lending, the sale of it, the transactional side, which I didn't really face much with my crack house. Mine was just the actual property itself was a problem. So which is good, like
we learned a ton. We learned a ton. Yeah. And it's definitely, it shapes how I approach the next deals for sure.
And it's interesting because, people always ask, like, obviously we want to avoid mistakes, and, we want to avoid those things as much as we can. Sure. But you can't avoid all of them. And you have to recognize that it's in going through those things that you're going to learn the greatest lessons. And, for me, obviously I like to mitigate that. I have a mentor myself, and he made lots and lots of mistakes, and he's now evolved to, he's buying Marriott hotels and stuff. And he's actually currently right now dealing with a nightmare of a problem. He had a contractor bust a sprinkler system on the 4th floor, which has resulted in a flood from floor 4 all the way down. And it's a 10-story building.
And the lobby and everything else, right?
Yeah. And the lobby, correct. And although, insurance will mitigate that, and, those things will ultimately work themselves out and such, it is a problem. And we're talking about someone that's done about $250 million in real estate transactions over 20 years, and he still has issues and problems. But the thing that's created his success, that created your success with the Spring Lake property, my success with the crack house, and multiple properties since, has always been our mindset and our perspective, that we see that as, listen, these things are part of the game, right? Like if we want to be successful, we want to build businesses, wealth with real estate, success in our career, in our marriage, with our bodies, whatever it is, we have to push through the hard things, the challenges, right? Like I shared earlier with jiu-jitsu. In order to get good, I have to get choked a lot, a lot.
Yeah.
And that's just the name of the game. And so many people run from that stuff, right? Like they run away. They don't want to get choked. They don't want to buy the crack house. They don't want to have the flood. They don't want to have those things. But at the end of the day, you wind up living a life of mediocrity because you've never been willing to take the risk and step out and push through those things. And that it is what it is.
Yeah, and it's interesting because my wife, in particular, is one that hates failing. Like she's very analytical. Also, will do things. Try to do everything she can to make sure it's a success from the first time. There's actually a sign right behind me that says "Failure is always an option. Do it anyway." So I think one of the traits that you and I share that I think a lot of entrepreneurs or successful employees or whatever share is that failure really is always an option. Like I joke and say I pretty much expect to fail the first time around. Like that way when I do fail, it's not a surprise.
It's not a surprise.
Yeah. So I think I don't know if you agree with that. I think that's something that
I do. I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
I think it's a good perspective because it gets people hoodwinked, right? And it gets people, disillusioned. They get involved into a thing and they automatically think, their first time they're going to succeed, right?
Mhm.
I keep using, jujitsu is something that's a major part of me. And I got the opportunity to train with Anderson Silva last year privately, who, if anybody listening to this knows anything about fighting or UFC or anything, you know who Anderson Silva is. He's probably one of the greatest fighting competitors of our generation and probably for years to come. And we talked about that. And I also had a chance, I was on Rich Franklin's podcast, who was a champion, and Rich and Anderson fought one another. And if you want to Google the fight, Anderson put Rich's nose on this side of his face.
Oh,
And it was a very, very brutal. He caught a knee that exploded his nose. And me and Rich personally talked about that. And me and Anderson talked about it. And it's interesting because if you met Anderson Silva, you would not think that he's a guy that could do those things to you. He's just a big smile. He's just very happy, very smiley guy. But when I spoke to Rich, he shared something with me that has really stuck with me since then. And we talked about fighting, and he said Rich was a middleweight champion at one point. And he told me, he said, no matter how many times I fought, no matter how many fights I won, no matter how good I got, every single fight, right before the fight, I would pray to God that something would happen in the arena that would stop the fight. The power would go out. Something weird would happen that would stop the fight. And he said, people think that because you've gotten successful, that you don't feel the fear. You don't feel the fear of failure or the what if. You do. Just the more you do it, the more you get the skill of learning how to deal with it and not allowing it to control you. And I think if there's any one thing that the people listening to this can take away is that you're going to feel the fear, right? Whether you're starting to exercise for the first time, whether you want to lose weight, whether you're trying to break into a new sphere of things in your marriage or fix your marriage or get a promotion or start a new business or start investing in real estate, you're going to feel fear, right? The thing is that learning how, right? Like when I was staring down the barrel of a 30-year sentence, I was scared to death, right? But I felt the fear, and I just, I didn't have the opportunity to not choose that. Yeah,
right.
Had they given me that option, then I probably would have chosen not to go down that sentence thing. But at the end of the day, it taught me that, and in all the things that I don't think anything I've ever done successful or business wise, personal development wise, where I didn't feel some level of fear or angst or anxiety or what if, what if it doesn't succeed or, what I'm actually getting ready to, I'm training currently for my first competition in jiu-jitsu. And I started training jiu-jitsu at 40 years old. I'm 42 now. And that's just not a thing that most people just don't do that. They just don't start at that age. And, I said, why not? Right. Like I wanted my kids to see that, like dad's always preaching this, feel the fear and do it anyway. And I didn't want to be the dad that, because you said, you asked me about fatherhood, and this can segue really into that. I didn't want to be the dad that my kids always saw, that always told them, hey, do this and push through it and don't be afraid and, find out what you're made of. And then wasn't the dad that did it also. And I thought jiu-jitsu was a great opportunity for my kids to look and go, dang, man, dad's 40 and he was willing to do this. My kids they've watched me get armbarred and choked and triangled and struggle, and they've seen it, man. And they've seen me continue to go back, and they've seen me continue to go back with enthusiasm. And I think that's probably, when it comes to fatherhood, I think that's probably been my greatest driver of how I approach fatherhood and how I think my role as a dad is to my kids is example, right? There's a saying that I learned, maybe I was in prison, maybe it was after, but it was, you teach what you know, you impart who you are. I see so many people that complain about who their kids are and who they've become and why aren't they doing this and why aren't they doing that? And I taught them better than that. But you didn't example better than that.
Right.
Yeah, you taught them. My own parents, my own dad even now says, we didn't teach you to do this, that, and the other. And I'm like, yeah, but really, maybe you didn't take me out and teach me how to walk into a store with a pistol and commit an armed robbery. Absolutely. You didn't teach me that. But you taught me that drugs was the answer to life's challenges. You taught me that if I didn't get what I wanted, to go take it from people. Those are the things you taught me by way of how you lived your lives. And that has influenced, how I parent my kids. Like I never want to just be the dad that just, hey, do this and don't do that and do this and do that. I want them to obviously they hear those things, of course, but I wanted them to see that in the things that I do. Real estate is a great example, right? Like my kids, I have broken down my deals to them and I've showed them, the goods, the bads, the great ones, the ugly ones, the whys, and all of that. And my kids have saw, again, real estate was something I took on at almost 38, 39 years old, brand new skill set. And, and my kids have so like, man, dad went from not knowing anything about real estate to building a multi-million-dollar portfolio, building a team. I have multiple contractor teams going, realtors, and they saw all of that. So when and the truth is, as dads that are listening to this, men that are trying to max out their lives, the respect that has come when I try to, if I sit my son down and I try to show him a real estate deal, or if I sit him down and I say, listen, bro, you're not giving it your all at practice. Mm-hmm. He's not going to look at me and go, yeah, dad, why'd you quit jujitsu though? Why did you told me you wanted to do jujitsu and you never did it, bro? Because my son would do that. He's that kind of kid. And he would say to me, listen, you want me to give it my all at practice. I wasn't running my hardest, but you said you wanted to do jujitsu and you never did it.
Right.
He can't do that. And there's a respect when I sit him down and I try to share with him, like, listen, buddy, you weren't, that kick you gave, that wasn't your all. You could have done better. Or that defender, you stopped running, man. You didn't pursue that defender with your all. And that he receives that because there's respect, and because he knows that I'm not just preaching at him. I'm imparting. Like, he knows that dad's not just telling me this, dad lives this. And I think that's incredibly valuable from a parenthood perspective.
Yeah, because your parenting style is opposite of what, so many of today's parents are doing. Like you're more old school from what I observe from the outside in terms
very
of
much
discipline, respect, consequences. You don't sit, if one of your kids do something wrong, you're not going to sit and ask them, please tell me for the next 30 minutes how you felt about that decision making, consequences and stuff like that. Is that something that I know you have a son and a daughter. I think one of the challenges for men as a whole right now is that these young men that are coming up, John is 11.
12.
John's 12. So
12.
you got a 12-year-old. So he's getting into those early preteen, teen years. And one of the challenges I think society faces right now is that these kids are basically not shown, first of all, and also told that being a man is wrong. Like, it's like, you're not able to do that. We're going a little bit longer, but I'm okay with that. If you don't mind sharing kind of how to raise boys, your philosophy and successes and failures and that kind of stuff. I'd love to know, because that's one of the challenges I think. And daughters, daughters are different, obviously, but the same. I know that you treat them similarly based on their own personalities, clearly, but
correct. And, both of my kids are fierce competitors. My daughter does jujitsu and she's 8 and she's been doing it for 2.5 years. And, my son's a soccer competitor and
very high level, by the way.
Both of the kids are, they, to be honest, man, they think, that I'm the inspiration or the motivation for them, Robin and I, but in a lot of ways they are to me, man. Like, they teach me so much, man. Like, because it's interesting, because kids only know limitations if you've taught them. And we've never taught either of the kids, limitations. And when my son just started learning how to trade stocks, and we brought a coach on to teach him how to, trade stock market. And the coach, the first thing she asked him was, what's his income goal for the next 12 months? And I had no idea what he was going to say. And he said $300,000, which, because that seems very attainable to him. Like, it's just normal. Like, $300,000, I could do that in the first year. Absolutely. Because he's never been given limitations. And, for the manhood side, you're right. And it's something that's not taught. It's society as a whole, especially Western society right now, is trying to make it as though manhood is bad, it's wrong, it's, toxic masculinity. And most of the problems that we see as a society, societal, and are related to that. There's not enough men that are standing up. They're not teaching boys to be men. They're not teaching respect for women. They're not teaching respect for humanity. They're not teaching those things. And I will teach my kids that, and I will continue on both sides, both my son and my daughter. And it's interesting because there's a story that pops up here. My son had a girlfriend, and they broke up last week, and the girl was not happy with it, and she really tried to be disrespectful to him, as teenage girl, you can imagine. And I had to see his text messages because her and one of her friends threatened to jump him. And it's funny because we learned of the situation after the fact, because my son comes running in the room frantic and he says, "Can I do jujitsu on a girl?" And my wife and I are like, "Hold on, where is this coming from? Like,
Yeah, why do you need this information?
And he's asking us that because he's been taught, he knows that we've taught him, put your hands on women, put your hands on girls, right? And so that's why he's asking that, because, these girls threatened to jump him, and he's like, he wants to know, can he defend himself? Because, he felt like, well, they would try to harm me, of which we said, absolutely. You're not going to just let them just beat you into the ground, and jiu-jitsu is probably the best thing you could do. Just kind of grab them and just control them and just keep them from pounding you. And we learned, so we had to turn over text messages to the school where the girls had threatened him. And so, my wife and I went back through text messages, and we saw, a lot of instances where this teenage girl was, really kind of coming at him the wrong way, man. And he handled it well, like the emotional intelligence. And even the first time he kissed her, I guess they were at a movie, and we had taken him to a movie, and they were sitting a little bit further from us. And we saw the text messages where he was asking her permission. Is it okay? Can I kiss you? Can I, and she said, yes, it's okay. And, I think those things are not really taught, man. Like you wonder, like, the rape culture is something that, that manhood is taking a blow for. And rightfully so. I think that's definitely something that we don't want as a society, but that happens because boys are not taught respect, right? They're, unfortunately, they're raised by men that oogle and look at pornography and are involved in these things. And then they wonder why their boys don't respect women and don't respect, girls, and why it's morphed into that. Well, unfortunately, that's what you taught them. And
or modeled for them with their own relationships, right? Yeah.
Or modeled for them, man. And, like my dad said to me, I didn't teach you how to be an armed robber. You're absolutely correct. You did not teach me. You didn't show me how to walk into a 7-Eleven with a pistol and rob the store. You did not. But you mirrored to me the characteristics that ultimately made that an optional choice to me. And I think to say, like, yeah, you don't teach boys how to rape women, but you teach them things and you impart to them by your character and by your daily choices that disrespecting women and objectifying them is okay. That is a natural extension of that, right? Like you were level 1. Don't get upset when your boy's level 2 and level 3 of that, because it just morphs and it just grows. And I think from a manhood perspective, we need that. We need men that are going to model those things to their boys. And the same thing to women. Like, girls, I know that as a dad, my role in my daughter's life is different than it is in my son's. The very first person she's going to look to know that she's desirable and beautiful and valuable is me. And it's been my job from the time, the very first date she ever went on was with me. I picked her up. I came to the house. My wife dolled her up and put her in a dress she was 4. And I picked her up like it was a date. I took her out to breakfast and
opened the door for her. All of that stuff. Yeah. Well, I used to do that with my girls too.
Absolutely. And that's why they have respect for themselves. And that's why they won't settle for things, and in their adult years, because they were not taught that. They were taught that they're valuable. Like, and if you're a dad of a daughter or if you're a dad of a son, that the character that you impart to them is the most valuable thing. A lot of my friends are dads, and people on Facebook I see, and a common complaint is, my kids don't listen to me. They don't do what I want. They don't whatever. And, sure, kids are kids. My kids are far from perfect. We have issues. We get called by the school. All those things still happen, of course, but it's what we do with those things. It's what we deal with them. Just like the challenges we talked about earlier. We have challenges as dads. We face challenges. Maybe the grades aren't the greatest, or, my son pushed a kid at school. I got to deal with that. It's what do we do with those things, right? And it's interesting. I think this is a good way to kind of tie all of the things that we've shared, because we went from prison to parenthood to marriage to real estate to business. I think a good way to really tie all of this is that all people tend to think that people that are successful, at least visibly successful, they've got good families, good kids, financially, business-wise, they tend to think that they've got it all together, or that it's easier for them. But the truth is that no, we face the exact same challenges, struggles, if not more, right? Like, you know how it is,
this is why I'm messaging you at 3 a.m. asking you about a particular Facebook ad or something like that, right? So.
Yeah. I think it was Mr. The Notorious B.I.G. and Mr. Puff Daddy said it best: more money, more problems. And that's just the truth, man. More money, more problems, right? More successes, more problems. And, to tie all of this, whether it's, having been an ex-convict, having been successful in real estate and different business, Facebook, parenthood, we all face struggles and challenges. It's how we view those. I think it's the mindset and the perspective shift to look at those, right? Like I get a phone call from my son's school. He got in trouble. I could get really mad and flip out. Why is this always happening? Oh, my son, my this, we're failing, we're this. Or I can see, this is a great opportunity to teach him respect for authority. This is a great opportunity to sit him down and show him, after I punish him and take away all of his privileges and make him stand against the wall and do all the consequences stuff. It's a great opportunity to use this to develop character, just like I believe God did when he said, I'm going to put you in prison for 10 years, buddy. I'm going to sit you down and I'm going to give you that 10-year sentence. And you're now going to develop character through these hard things. And the same thing with exercising my real estate muscle. I bought a crack house and I developed it. You bought Spring Lake and you won't make those same mistakes again.
Right.
I hope not.
Right. Yeah.
I'll do everything I can to make sure that you don't. But
right.
And I think, to be, to maximize our manhood, and for the men that are listening to this, is, to embrace the struggles, to embrace the challenges that life throws at us, and allow our minds to reframe those as opportunities for growth, opportunities for improvement, opportunities to chart new territory and develop new skills, new characteristics, and just become better men all around.
Yeah, man, that's a great place to land. I really, really appreciate your perspective. Respect you tremendously, obviously. How do people find you? Obviously, Mike is a coach and mentor extraordinaire across various topics. I'm pretty sure his parenting book will be coming out soon.
Everybody's asked Robin and I about that.
It's still being written,
yeah.
Right? So, So tell people how to find you. And
I mean, there's a couple of ways. Real estate is probably the main thing that I'm really involved in now. Success, but find me on Facebook. Send me a friend request or follow me on Facebook. Web properties, reinvestingsuccess.com is a great place to find out about the real estate investing. I do have a YouTube channel that's also RE Investing Success on YouTube. And, just find me there, man. And the book, if you're interested in the prison book, it's FromPrisonToProsperity.com. There's a video that shares my story a little bit and kind of gives you a little bit of insight into that side of the story. And, man, I love sharing and love to connect with folks.
Man, I really appreciate you. And in this case, I'll talk to you today at some point, I'm sure. All right, brother. Thanks, buddy.
If you're looking to really maximize your life and become the man you were made to be, head over to maxedoutman.com and get your journey started today.